It is an absolute delight to interview Scott Berdahl, CEO of Snowline Gold, and I can't tell you how excited I am. And this is actually the last interview today here at Beaver Creek for Crescat, and we've been doing this series to introduce, and have our exciting new discoveries told by the people who run the companies. And I'm not going to pretend this has got to be the most riveting gold story I think I've been involved with. Just watching it from afar and watching you guys do your work, absolutely amazing discovery. And I guess what I would do is say, tell us about Snowline, where you're at, what projects you're focused on. Mm-hmm. We'll start there, and then we'll plow into.
Okay.
Okay.
Snowline is about gold and it's about discovery. We are a greenfield-focused, Yukon-based and Yukon-focused explorer. We come out of 30 years of prospecting in the Yukon. I'm 36 years old and I've been at it almost 30 years. My dad's a prospector. He's been dragging me out in the bush since the 80s, and
God bless him.
Well, maybe early 90s, but nonetheless, it's been a long haul, and he's come out with a lot of interesting ideas, and really our competitive advantage was always to go where other people aren't, and that led to good and bad outcomes. But in the long run, you get a few good outcomes here and there, and over the decades, they start to add up. And we got to a point where we had this project portfolio that of really distilled assets from sweep away the failures of decades of work and keep the gems. And we had them at a point where we just couldn't do anything as private prospectors anymore. And we've had tough markets, so these are really kind of fire tested by attrition of just hard economic times to cling on to these little postage stamps and make it work. And so we got to a point where we needed more resources, and we launched Snowline. We had the help of Keith Newmeyer coming in and bringing in a shell and helping to arrange the initial financing, which of course Crescat was instrumental in and has been instrumental since in helping us do what we do. I forget the rest of your question, but
well, you're focused in the Yukon,
mm-hmm.
And look, I'm familiar with your story and the history because I've known your dad for quite some time. I think I first met your father in 2004 when I was at Newmont. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, about that same time, Newmont was doing work in the Yukon too, and I remember some of the anomalies that were turning up there, and they were whoppers. I mean, you want to talk about new frontiers. That region, the eastern Yukon in particular, was just absolutely ripe with discovery. And there was the ATAC story there for a few years, the Carlin-esque type stuff that. It's refractory gold mineralization, very interesting, and I think it's got quite a lot of potential. But the thing that was really interesting were these more subtle, but also high value targets. These Tintina type gold systems. Mm-hmm. So tell us about your properties. Kind of run through and give everybody a description.
Yeah, I mean, so we've got 7 projects, and I won't walk you through every single one of them, but what's really caught our attention is a cluster of 4 projects that cover what's really an emerging district in the eastern Yukon, as you say. And we have the Rogue project, which has really become our flagship. We almost have 2 flagships with discoveries we made last year, doing 2 different projects, making fantastic discoveries on both of them. And again, these are greenfield things. These aren't a new angle on an old project or new slant, or we're going to test this from this direction. These are just totally greenfield, brand new things. And in the case of our valley discovery, mineralization just sticking out of the ground, and a kilometer scale intrusion that's mineralized sticking out of the ground. So it just shows that the potential. And I would argue that these reduced intrusion systems aren't necessarily that subtle. To vector in on a valley takes a bit of work and a lot of luck, but this region geochemically lights up, and even in the regional geochem database, and it's just kind of and there's such a little amount of historical work there that it's kind of baffling, because you see these big numbers and you think, okay, well, what's wrong with it, because you just look at it at a Yukon scale and there it is. And so why isn't anyone here? Why isn't anybody doing anything? And now and I think that's kind of just maybe been an unspoken consensus that okay, well, somebody must have looked at this, so it must not be good. But with Valley, we're finding that. So Valley itself, is a part of the Rogue project. Rogue covers a series of these Fort Knox style intrusions, mid-Cretaceous age, and very prospective by association with the rest of this suite and the gold deposits found along that trend. Very prospective for these reduced intrusion, these big bulk tonnage gold targets. And to the north of that, we have our Einarson project, which was, we were also looking for Carlin-style mineralization in that area. Again, that's one of my dad's ideas, to go out there and look around. We were doing that before Attack made their discovery. And of course, we couldn't get anybody interested in that kind of an idea as just independent prospectors way out there. But when Attack made their discovery and really showed the world that this area is prospective for that kind of mineralization, we were out there the next day taking target after target and really put that together into a giant land position, and which is very prospective for Carlin. What we're finding now is actually orogenic mineralization, very shallow orogenic mineralization, and some really nice grades so far. And that was the other drill discovery that we made last year right out of the gate. And in the area, we have two other projects that really kind of bring together this almost like a district of districts. You have this intrusive district, you have this epithermal and or epizonal orogenic and maybe Carlin district, and then you have interesting combinations thereof in the vicinity on these other projects.
Okay, yeah, look, it is absolutely ripe for discovery. Now Valley is what I would call a classic tombstone or Tintina type deposit or system. It appears to be associated with granite or granodioritic intrusion in this case. Little difference, but it seems to have all the characteristics of the same system you see at Victoria, the Eagle deposit, or the Fort Knox deposit, but with one big difference: scale. This is an extraordinary scale. What you found so far. Can you tell people a little bit about what you've been doing drill-wise and stuff to define the footprint at Valley? And then we'll talk about Gracie here in a minute too.
The scale is it's a part of these systems to make a bulk tonnage system work. And what has us really excited is the grade. Where at Fort Knox, their head grade starting out was I think 0.93, and now they're down to an average grade of something like 0.3. And with a cutoff grade of 0.1, and then you have Eagle, and I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I think it's around 0.6.
That's right, yeah.
And so we're drilling intersections there that are, actually we have very few assays in hand at this point, but one of our holes in a big step out to build out scale quickly, from surface we have 283 meters of, and that's of a 450 meter hole. The bottom part of it, we're still waiting for the assays, exactly, but 283 meters of 2.3 grams with a zone in there that's 146 meters of 3.2. So we're seeing densities that are just not present in other systems. So we think we have the potential to kind of redefine what a reduced intrusion gold system can be. And there's this kind of cap that you see in other deposits, but what we think is happening here is that you might, just like a lot of porphyry systems, enrich by basically you're mineralizing the same piece of ground multiple times with multiple pulses of the mineralization. We have evidence for that happening here at Valley with cross-cutting sheeted vein sets, and but also even bits of like one intrusive phase that's veined and is swept up in another intrusive phase.
Interesting.
That's not veined by that generation, but it's cut by another generation, which also cuts through that clast. And so you can see, okay, this has happened multiple times in the same spot. But I've totally dodged your question on scale. We set out, we recognize that there's a high bar that comes with this access to these big deposits sticking out of the ground because we're in a remote location, and so we're aiming for something big. And so when we drilled our discovery holes last year on the edge of this system, we were very excited by what we saw, but we wanted to kill it and move on, or know that it was big very quickly. And so we started with a 150 meter step back across just the width of the system to get a better sense of it, turned the drill around from there and drilled in the other direction to keep figuring out the width of it. Then we stepped 300 meters out along strike of the system, and that's the hole that I mentioned. That was our first real look into the heart of this intrusion, and we've since after that we stepped out another 300 meters, basically building these fences of 300 meters across this this intrusion. And the intrusion itself is about 1 kilometer long, 800 meters wide. We've seen visible gold in all parts of it, different vein densities in different parts of it. And so, it's not going to be a totally homogeneous blob of things. It's going to have, we're clearly seeing a very nice high density zone that itself could be, quite a fantastic resource. And then you look at, from there building out into this lower grade areas.
Yeah, I've played around with numbers. In fact, I've spoken publicly in the videos that we do at Crescat about where I think this could head, and there definitely is a higher grade core to the system, maybe maybe 400 or 500 meters across, and that would include your hole that you mentioned, the 2.3 gram interval, and I think you're waiting on lots more holes. Like basically everything you've drilled this year is still in the lab awaiting assay.
Yeah, more than 90%.
But it's it's clear to see right now that you have a high grade core based on the vein densities, observations around visible gold. And then around that, you have a very large cloud that is effectively, similar scale to the intrusion itself, like a kilometer diameter intrusion. And that itself is remarkable because you look at the scale of this, and you compare it to the other big ones like Fort Knox, and this is actually probably multiples of that, like 2 or 3 times the size footprint of what, and the grade, like you said, is higher. So not only is it spatially bigger, but the grade's higher. So this should bode well for very large discovery. I see no chinks in that armor. There's a big deposit here.
Certainly a big deposit, yeah. And I think the scale is I mean, I would have to dig into the literature again, but I think that Fort Knox is a pretty reasonably sized deposit. But yeah, you don't get that 283 meters at 2.3.
No, I remember going to Fort Knox in 1996 when they opened it.
I
was there right after the first blast, and they were quite proud of the fact that the first bench was a gram.
Exactly.
So 2.3 gram. That's absolutely off the chart with respect to these types of systems.
Yeah.
Now, what makes them work is the metallurgy. They're very metallurgically friendly. Usually free gold, particulate gold, but finely divided into veins.
Yeah.
And then you have like ability to recover both free gold through gravity and so forth, but also heap leaching. Look at Eagle. Eagle is 100% heap leach.
Yeah.
So tell us what you might be doing. Once you get your drilling done and get out of the field. Any plans for metallurgy?
Yeah. We definitely want to dig into the metallurgy, and we're pretty happy with what we know in looking over the fence at similar deposit types, as you mentioned, and then even looking closer to home at other early stage prospects that have done their metallurgy work, and you see like, okay, that looks really good too. And so we're planning to do metallurgy in the fall. Well, basically that'll be kind of the last thing we do as we get out of the field is take those samples. We want to wait till we have a little bit more information on grades so we can set up a good representative sample of different areas of the deposit and different grades. And should we not have the assays that we want in hand at that time, we can always, we do have a pretty good proxy with vein densities. So we'll put together a pretty robust test of the metallurgy, we want to show people that this deposit ticks a lot of the right boxes, and it certainly looks like it does. So, get over that hurdle. And
I have very little doubt because, observationally, you don't see lots of sulfide here. So it's not, there's just nothing for the gold to get bound up in. So it looks like it should behave just like Fort Knox or Eagle. So
it's very similar looking mineralization, at that gold or scale. Of course, just more veins.
Now you've got Gracie, which is a very large geochemical anomaly at this point around the corner. Basically, it's just to the east or northeast from Valley. But the footprint of gold anomalies in there is quite extensive. Now, you made it very clear in your presentation that you think Gracie is a similar intrusive hosted system or related system, but perhaps at a bit deeper level. You've got a sedimentary cap, like the roof of the intrusion is still intact. Tell us what you're doing at Gracie this year to kind of get, I realize it's early days, but what's your approach been at Gracie?
Yeah, so we've hit that with a lot of the same tools that we hit Valley with. It is a little different because we can't just walk right up to the intrusion. But geochemically, it has a fingerprint very much like Valley with that strong bismuth and tellurium association with the gold. Geophysically, in a regional ZDEM conductivity survey, you see these resistive plugs right where Valley is, and you see a subdued one, which you might expect with some cover right where Gracie is. And then, of course, the rocks themselves are just cooked, and you need a heat source to cook rocks, and so there's none in any direction, not one above it. So
there,
yeah. And so in terms of work this year, we got back out on the surface and just did really intensive mapping, looking at structures and veins and mineralization on surface and that sort of thing. And one thing we picked up on, which is really interesting, is that those that kind of 320 orientation vein set that we have at Valley, the geology is going the other way at Gracie. Well, it's going the same way at Valley too, but this 320 vein set shows up again at Gracie, and so we've done some density mapping there to try to get a better picture of what's hot, what's maybe not as much, and use those as vectors. And then so with the drilling, we're kind of testing with a broad sweep across the area, trying to get deep, trying to get cut through a bunch of different rocks, and hopefully, if not making an outright discovery, at least finding something that that we can use as a good vector in the first hole. That we did hit veins that are, again, that 320 generation. They have bismuth. We found visible gold in them. We're not seeing like the crazy densities that we're seeing at Valley, but nonetheless, that's a very good sign. And and hopefully we can, if not find the intrusion outright, vector towards it.
I think you gotta, because it's buried, you're gonna have to hone in on the mothership. You got to find that core, and it might take a season or two. But I think it's there. There's no question that with bismuthinite, which is an indicator mineral, and seeing the visible gold like you are. And I remember in the early days around Fort Knox, there was very similar hornfels and sulfide style mineralization in the kind of the Oriole around Fort Knox. I think Amex actually tried to figure out for years what they could do with that, and I don't know how that ever ended up as part of the mine complex, but it was definitely there. I remember seeing those rocks. So nice. You got it. Now, before we completely leave Snowline here, and Einarson, the Jupiter discovery last year is actually the first discovery you made, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to go a little bit further with this. Look, you showed me core in, I think, 2019.
Float.
Yeah, well, or not core, sorry, float in 2019. Nice slab pieces of what was clearly vuggy quartz, but orogenic nature. Like, it hands down. And you don't see that often. Like, you don't see that very often, because Mother Nature likes to erode the upper parts of orogenic systems. Okay, and that really caught my attention. There was that and some of the mineralogy, but we won't go off in those weeds. But look, what's astounding is you basically drilled, what was really defined as a geochemical anomaly more than anything, in virtually every hole hit. And in fact, many, if not, I'd say better than half of those hit, at least some 10 gram plus intervals. And there were some nice long intervals and then stacks of mineralization. Look, I've seen a lot of early stage discoveries, and to drill something blind, geochemical anomaly like that and hit, that speaks volumes about what could be there. So why don't you touch on what you think you have there at Jupiter?
Yeah, so that was interesting. So that summer 2019, I'd been out there and chasing this boulder train, and was really excited by it. I'm really kind of baffled by it because I'd been working on a bunch of epithermal systems in Nevada, and so different geology, volcanics nearby, and so on, and so to see this out here where there's there's no source for an epithermal system, and but seeing these textures, which are very shallow, you get in these epithermal systems, you get fluids boiling, and so you get bladed calcite, and then you have quartz come and replace that. And so to see that texture and see this like coliform texture and all these other things, I brought these to you and was kind of scratching my head, and of course that was the conference season, winter of 2019, 2020, and Newfound had made their discovery, and
That's right,
so that was interesting. You were the right guy to talk to at that point, saying, "Hey, Quinton, what's this?" And I think you either walked me over or sent me over to their booth to look at that core, and it was like, "Oh, that's interesting." It's not dripping with VG, but nonetheless, that's there are a lot of parallels here, and so that was neat. That was my kind of introduction into the epizonal parts, the shallow parts of orogenic systems, and it was clearly a really exciting prospect. We had a 3-kilometer geochem anomaly, but we had these till blankets covering a lot of it. It's a glaciated valley. You're standing on what you think might be close to subcrop, but then you look over at another kind of plain right there, and it's clearly, you can see a creek cutting into it, and it's clearly like 20 meters of till, and so it's like, okay, how do we drill this? And I've just launched this company and got all this backing about this great target, so let's do something.
Good.
And so we came up with a few ideas. There was one area where the vegetation was actually pretty weak, and because of antimony probably in the soil, that was the strongest antimony anomaly there. And of course, Fosterville, antimony is a good thing to have.
Yep.
And so that was one target, and that was an area where actually, just as I mentioned, you look across and there's a lot of till, and so we think, okay, how far does this come down the valley? But our reasoning was that there's mineralized quartz coming out there too, but also the fact that the concentrations are high enough to deter vegetation from really taking root on that spot. It probably hasn't been mixed too much as it comes down the valley, and then and we drilled there, and honestly, I don't think we've explained the antimony yet. So we have hit the system, so I think that's a good sign, but we might have missed our target. Nonetheless, we went down to our other target at the time, which was again till, not as much, and there was just a subtle linear feature in the landscape that was actually pointing towards that zone of kill zone, basically. And so that geometry was really intriguing to us, and there was mineralized quartz on the hill below it, we couldn't really locate anything on the hill above it, and so we figured, okay, this could be the surface expression of a structure, maybe based on the quartz distribution. Let's try it. And so we stepped back, and those are the big, the headline holes that we pulled out of there on 10 and 11, 12, 13. We stepped to the north 150 meters, hit it again, got another nice thing of like 13 grams over, I forget, a few meters, 3 point something, and then so at that point we had clearly tagged in something interesting, and we kind of could rest on our laurels a little bit in terms of being able to drill a wildcat hole. So we decided, there's an area where the soils light up. It looks like it's all just till. It's flat. There's nothing to use to target. Let's just sink a hole into it and see what happens. And we drilled through 15 meters of till. We got to bedrock, and we hit our first VG in the system.
Unbelievable.
So, yeah. And so that's 1.1 kilometers from that linear feature down in the south. It's on a 3-kilometer soil anomaly.
Yeah.
The till itself is going to mask things, so we still have a lot to figure out about what's there and what the scale is. And then, that's on a fault system that 12 kilometers to the south. The year after, I went back out there on just a shoestring prospecting program, and found another a kilometer scale quartz boulder train, just like at Jupiter. Grab samples there, assaying up to 34 grams. So we're excited to get out onto that too.
Look, I've never seen a company make 2 drill discoveries. I mean, I'm not talking just outcrop discoveries. Pinging on something with that rock hammer. You made 2 bona fide drill discoveries in one season, and that's crazy. I mean, the odds of that are getting struck by lightning like twice in one summer.
Yeah.
So kudos to you. I mean, and I'm glad you approached it like you did. It's really good to hear, both at Jupiter and Valley, really, the way you've approached it. To go in and sharpshoot the best area in your target, or what you perceived as the best area, hit, demonstrate it's there, and then immediately start defining the footprint of a system, because so many people or so many companies they get lost in the sauce. They get too focused on I'm not arguing against incremental drilling, but there's a time and a place for it.
Yeah.
And when you have a short season, you gotta make hay, and you gotta demonstrate, you gotta discovery.
Yeah.
You gotta do what you said you did. Step out a kilometer, drill down here. Now you can see that's going to be a major discovery. So Einarson Jupiter is equally intriguing. And it complements what you've done at Valley now, because at Valley you really have done a great job of defining the footprint. You've got this array of drill holes across the intrusion that, once the results are back, I don't think anybody on the planet could say, this is a small system or one. This is going to be a major discovery. So you know, it's amazing to watch this, and you know, I congratulate you wholeheartedly. You couldn't happen to a nicer guy.
Well, thanks, Quinton. And it couldn't happen to a nicer team. Like it's, I just helped get the ball rolling here, and you know, the group of people that we put together behind Snowline, including our supporters, but you know, also the technical team that we have, the board that we have. I mean, it's been a group push, and yeah, I'm really happy with the way that it's all come together. And yeah, no, we're really happy to see this, you know, our hard work paying off.
It's going to pay off even more.
Sure hope so.
All right, man. Thank you.
Yeah.